right, everyone. It looks like it is 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jessica Dean, and I work for AIM Transportation Solutions in the marketing department. I'm just going to give everybody a quick intro, and then I will pass the mic over to the real talent, Mr. John Rugarber, who's presenting for us today. So for the majority of this meeting, we're going to keep everyone on mute just to eliminate background noise. We are recording today's session, which is going to focus on the recent revisions being made to CSA scores by the FMCSA. John's going to go into the nitty-gritty of all of that. This has the potential to impact the way your company is graded on its safety, and we all want to be compliant there. AIM definitely does as well, so we know exactly how you guys feel. So we want to make sure that everyone stays both operational and profitable. Before we get started, I just want to take a quick moment and tell you a little bit about both AIM and these monthly webinar series that we host. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we've gotten a pretty good following. So there's quite a few of you who've been on these before, and we appreciate you coming back and joining us for these. AIM Transportation Solutions is a company that offers full service leasing, commercial rentals, maintenance program, dedicated contract carriage, brokerage, 3PL, LTL, professional shop management, and the sale of used equipment. Basically, if distribution is part of your business, come talk to us because we can make life a heck of a lot easier for you. So there's definitely something that we do that would fit into your business, and we're the best. This is one of a series of monthly webinars that AIM offers to both our customers and members of the business community who are involved with fleet management or transportation. It's really anyone who wants to join. It's an open session. So if you can benefit from it, we're glad you're on. Please share it with anyone else you think should be on, and hopefully we continue to grow. We have some of the brightest and most innovative members of the transportation community employed at AIM. We recently got listed in Newsweek as a most loved company, and AIM employees voted AIM as such. We're a really unique company that recognizes the value in both transparency and giving back. So these webinars aim to share our information resources with all of you out there. Today, we have one of our brightest resources hosting, Mr. John Rugarber. John has worked at AIM for 20 years. He's been an expert in mentoring our drivers in proper safety practices. John is a certified Smith System instructor and an expert in the field of all things safety. John is the man. So John is involved in AIM's CDL apprenticeship program as a training administrator. He also conducts safety training programs for customers and national lease affiliates throughout the country. We are a member of the National Lease Affiliation. So John wears many hats, and he really knows it all when it comes to safety. So he's been a great host, and he has hosted many of our webinar series here. So this isn't your first time seeing John for many of you. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session. You can also type in your questions as we go, and if John's flow allows him to answer questions throughout the presentation, he'll grab them. If not, he'll get to them at the end. I will send out a recording of this session and John's notes to everyone that registered for the meeting sometime tomorrow. So keep a lookout for that. And if you want to talk about anything related to your fleet, you can feel free to reach out to me too. I'm happy to talk to you about that or put you in contact with the right person. So with that being said, I'm going to pass the mic over to John. And John, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Jessica. That was a very nice intro, and I really appreciate it. I want to say thank you to both you and Conrad for helping me present these webinar series. You do a great job in supporting the system from behind, so I really appreciate that. For everybody, welcome. For everybody on the West Coast, if there's anybody, sorry it's 7 a.m. there, but get up early and you get a lot of work done early. So I appreciate anybody on the West Coast sitting in. It's going to be a good time. So we, like Jessica mentioned, we offer these webinar series, prefer hopefully every month, but once in a while we pick particular subjects that are of importance. And this subject matter that we're going to talk about today is the CSA prioritization preview. Today's date's November 21st, 2023. And as Jess mentioned, my name is John Rugarber. I'm a regional safety manager for AIM Transportation Solutions. And I've been with AIM, yes, like Jessica said, for approximately 23 years. And I won't go back through all the accolades because Jessica did a great job doing all that. My contact info is below my name there on the screen, jrugarber@aimntls.com. So if you'd like to reach out after the webinar is completed with any additional questions or comments, I really do appreciate them. We can only get better as we do each one, and sometimes feedback is the best thing that you could hope for. So this webinar is a little different than others I've done. I've tried to minimize some of my screen wordage on the screens. This one's got a lot of information. It was a little difficult to narrow them down. So some of it I'm going to read. I will add some input to it. There's going to be some links at the end that I'm hoping will open and we can get a closer view of what the website looks like. But with that being said, let's move on and get started. So currently, I'm sure everyone on this particular webinar is familiar with this particular logo here, the CSA, the Safety Measurement System methodology. So this is the current system that we're working under. CSA is a core component of the SMS system, and it focuses its resources mainly on inspections, enforcement, and compliance on carriers that pose a high risk to safety on the roadways. So in 2019, FMCSA completed an IRT, or an item response theory study, which if anybody's really interested, you can Google that IRT thing, but it's quite complicated. Unless you're a statistician, it may be a little over your head. But that study was suggested by the National Academy of Science in the hopes that it could identify some changes that could be brought into the system. Now, with that being said, FMCSA stepped up their game and they want to try to, I guess, improve the flow of data that's going into the system. And one way they're going to do this is they're going to prioritize carriers for safety interventions. So that's what this new logo is below that. You're going to see that CSA prioritization preview. Again, don't try to say that 3 times fast. You'll probably make it to the second time before it starts to get all jumbled up. But it is called the new prioritization methodology. So at the moment, it's only a methodology and it's only a proposal, and they're beginning to put it together now. So the initial preview release date was January 27th of 23. So based on the study, these proposed enhancements have been released and they may or may not be put into place. This system is not actively working. It is in the preview stage. That's why it is called the preview. You can go into your DOT, your portal, and you could see what your numbers and your percentiles would look like if this methodology is put into place, but it's not cemented in yet. So that's kind of where we stand at the moment. So currently we're at the CSA Safety Measurement System methodology, which everybody should be familiar with. And we're going to be moving into this new prioritization methodology. So again, we got that prioritization preview up there, and their reasons for doing this was trying to improve the data organization and the flow of this data into the system. So if anyone doesn't know, the FMCSA regulates approximately 700,000 motor carriers throughout the country. They complete approximately 13,000 inspections a year. And this is only accomplished with a staff of about 400 federal investigators, along with about 1,200 MCSAP certified state level inspectors. So as you can see, they have a tremendously big job in front of them in terms of trying to keep carriers inspected and trying to get interventions done and things like that. So that was another reason that they needed to try to enhance this program, is to allow the carriers that were unsafe or needed an intervention to come to the top of the list, and instead of going through a number of carriers that really probably didn't need interventions. SMS was first introduced in April 2010, if anybody remembers, and this replaced the SafeStat system, where at that point, the only thing that really entered the system were out of service violations. They replaced it with the SMS system in April of 2010. And then in December, just in time for Christmas, if we all remember, CSA came out with the 7 basics, and that whole system began. So, you know, this has been an ongoing process, and it will continue to be an ongoing process. And they're going to start doing it in phases of implementation. So let's look at that real quick while we're here. Take a look at what that looks like. So this first phase of implementation is what they're calling the prioritization preview, and we're in that right now. Now they've collected comments. This comment period has ended on May 16th of 2023. You can no longer make comments into the system. Now the interesting thing is you can go into the system, into the CSA preview. If you just plug that in, that'll come up on your Google search. You can go in and scroll down just a bit on there, and off to the right, you'll see read public comments. If I'm not mistaken, I think there were 177 comments. I think that I may have read 175 of them. I'm not sure. But I whittled it down for you. And at the end of this presentation, I'll give you about 7 or 8 what I thought were really good comments and discussions on this methodology going forward. There were, I kind of feel bad for FMCSA. Some of the comments were, it just gave people a chance to vent. Really had nothing to do with the system at all, but it's kind of interesting to read the comments, but I've whittled that down for anybody who's interested. You can also go in and carriers can check their profiles now. Now, when I say check them, this is the proposed profile. This is what the look will look like. It's going to look different than what you currently have. So as you get your monthly report updated in the SMS system, you will have an updated report in your prioritization profile so that you can get an idea what your numbers are going to look like and what your percentiles are going to look like going forward. And also the FMCSA did 3 webinars on this that you can go in. It's on the website also. You can click on their webinars. They're an hour long. You put in your code and you can go see them at any time. And one of the biggest mentions in those webinars, but there will be no changes to the SMS at this point in time. So don't get worried about what you're seeing. This is not set in stone. It's just a proposal. Also, I put a link down there at the bottom, that prioritization preview carrier. That will take you to your login sheet where you can either use your DOT number or your login with your PIN as a company to go in and see your particular percentiles and numbers. So let's look at phase 2. So we're currently in phase 2 and they're beginning to revise the prioritization. They're reviewing all of those comments that I mentioned. I imagine they're going to read through all 177 of those. And I imagine they probably have at this point since the window has closed in May on that. They're going to begin to incorporate those that align with what they want to do. So they're going to be taking some of the comments and they're going to go back to their system and hopefully change a few things. As we progress through this, and you may have questions, I don't know if I will be able to answer them as far as the reasons why they chose to do certain things, but hopefully they'll take some of these comments to heart and reassess what they're going to do. And also they're going to assess the other impacts to other areas of the SMS system, such as the data queues, the ISS, the inspection selection system, the safety fitness determinations. One thing that will not change, and that was due to the FAST Act, was the public versus private views. They will remain the same under those constraints of that FAST Act that was implemented in, I think, 2015. And then we get to the phase 3. Again, in these 3 webinars, the gentleman was very insistent on the fact that there was not a date start on this program. So I can't give that to you. I don't know when it's going to begin. I'm sure when it begins that they would be more than happy to let us know. But they're going to begin to implement that new system when it starts. Enforcement will begin, and when they say enforcement will begin, everyone, it's not going to change. You're still going to get inspected. You're going to still see an inspection report. Really, this is more a methodology for the FMCSA to better prioritize those individual carriers. So this won't be a tremendous change in the sense that enforcement will do different things. You would still be pulled into weigh stations, still have independent inspections on the roadways, still see your DOT reports with your violations noted in there. So that won't change. And then the third item on that is they will begin to prioritize for interventions. So now with this new system in place, they'll begin to zero in on carriers that really do need the interventions and not worry about the carriers that may have been below the radar, and they may have fallen into that enforcement program, but the level of severity was not as high as carrier number 2, for example. So carrier number 1, they had low numbers, but they were still being prioritized. And yet carrier number 2 has a much higher number, much more severity to their violations, and they would get the interest in this particular program. So at this point in time, probably a number of you are sitting there going, why are they doing this? I don't understand why the FMCSA is changing again. Well, one of the mantras that FMCSA keeps going around is the continuous improvement leading to increased safety. So basically, FMCSA is always looking for opportunities to continually improve the SMS system or the safety measurement system, along with the decision-making processes that are involved in that. So that's really the biggest reason why they're moving in this particular direction. So as with anything, you can never stay stagnant. Businesses need to constantly improve and change their processes to try to get a better positioning in the marketplace. So the same thing applies with FMCSA. They're just trying to improve their system so they can make better decisions and prioritize carriers that are more are higher on the severity level, shall we say. So let's get into how is FMCSA enhancing SMS itself. There's going to be three items that they're really going to address here. And the first one is going to be fairness. So one of the things that a lot of carriers were upset about is they felt that they were not being compared equally to carriers of their stature or their size or what they carry. I know way back in the beginning of CSA, there was a lot of uproar with the flatbed community in terms of how things were written up. So that's what one of the things we're trying to do is ensuring greater consistency in results by holding similar carriers to the same standard, regardless of how their safety issues are documented. All right. So, for example, they're thinking of changing the hazmat, and they're going to segment that out, make it hazmat cargo versus non-cargo carriers, which they do not have that distinction right now. And they're going to make a few other ones, and we'll look at those as we come up in future slides. The second item is the accuracy of this information going into the system. And again, the item response theory, they thought they were going to go with that program. It turned out to be very, very problematic in the sense that it was very, very data heavy. The downtime to try to get the information into the system, in one of those webinars the gentleman mentioned, they were looking at 30 or more days for the information to get entered into the system because of the type of study that it was. And that's why it was subsequently removed from the choice of that. So again, the accuracy of the data, they're trying to improve the quality of the data that comes into the system so that they could stay focused on the motor carriers in most need of intervention. And one thing they did find an interesting side note to this is that the crash rate for carriers that were prioritized using the new methodology, because this began, I think they ran a test program from 2016 to 2018. They gathered some information, put it together from 2018 to 2020, and they found that by putting this new methodology in place, they were able to go from then the numbers don't sound good per se, but from 7.07% to 7.73%, which is roughly a 10% higher gathering rate under the new methodology versus old CMS. And also another thing they're going to do is they're going to help with the clarity of the information going into the system. They're going to hopefully make it easier for the carriers to understand what's going into the system and be able to look at it and make quicker decisions and better informed decisions as time goes on. So those 3 items are really what they're going to try to focus on as they move into this new program. And only time will tell as to how it will be. But some of the comments do have good responses in the sense that they felt that it was a better visibility for them, easier to understand from a carrier's point of view. And again, FMCSA obviously has a bias. I mean, they feel that this particular program will assist them in prioritizing the unsafe carriers on the roadway. So what they've done is they've taken about 9 items here, or 9 changes that they're going to propose. The one in the far right lower corner, accounting for not preventable crashes, not a big one. That's really not going to change. I'm not sure why that was put in there, but this was pulled off of the website screen. I did a screenshot of this, but we'll look at each one and see what they mean by reorganizing basics. So let's take a look at this one. So they're going to reorganize the vehicle maintenance basic. And what they're going to do, instead of having basics, which they had in CSA, are 7 basics, which were unsafe driving, hours of service, compliance, vehicle maintenance, controlled substance and alcohol, hazmat, driver fitness, and then the crash indicator, which is more, it's more, not specifically an indicator, but more of a consequence of the other 6 indicators. But regardless, they're going to move vehicle maintenance. They're going to break that into 2 sections. They're going to make it vehicle maintenance, which they're going to align more towards shop, garage, level 1 inspections, where more of a mechanic type of oriented inspection. They wouldn't expect the driver to necessarily know whether his lubrication points are lubricated properly. But then they are going to move another one into a category they're going to call vehicle maintenance driver observed. And the key word in this is reasonably be observed. So anytime you put the word reasonably in something, it opens the door to many different opinions, but that's what they said. And they're also going to incorporate unsafe driving. They're going to bring the controlled substance and alcohol abuse into the unsafe driving. So let's take a look at what that'll look like real quick. All right, so in the left here, you have vehicle maintenance. Now I've chosen 3 of these violations. There's many of them, I think 406, if I'm not mistaken, under vehicle maintenance. Leaks and constrictions for one, lubrication, and the rear impact guard. Anybody who's been following any of the regulations, there seems to have been a big push within the last few years for this basically rear impact guards, your ICC bumpers, to be brought up to spec. I have no idea how they're going to do it. This keeps going on and on. It's got to be at least 4 years. This has been in the works. But those are the three of the items of many that the feds do not expect drivers to really be inspecting and understand what they're looking at. If you move to the right, you'll see the vehicle maintenance driver observed. Now, those are 3 that I've chosen that obviously are pretty blatantly driver observable violations. You have hoses chafing and kinking, windshield obstructed. Little difficult to explain to an officer that that big old 11-inch GPS screen that's sitting right in front of my face on my windshield is not in my way. And then knotted tie downs, I use that more or less, bring in the cargo securement guys. You know, you're using a strap that you kind of knotted for whatever particular reason, and now you have an out of service violation. So those are kind of how they're going to break them up. Obviously, I can't put all the violations. As we get further down, hopefully when those links open up, I can actually show you these violation groups real quick and you'll get a better idea. And then we move on to the controlled substance. Now, there was only 11 of the controlled substance and alcohol abuse violations. The FMCSA felt that they did not have a large correlation to crash risk. And they felt that they would be better served placed into unsafe driving. And part of the reason was, for example, a driver himself, him or herself, decides that they want to use or they want to carry drugs. A driver, him or herself, decides if they want to consume alcohol within 4 hours. And again, a driver, him or her, decides whether they want to violate an out-of-service order pursuant to 392.5. For example, the truck is placed out of service for a flat tire. The driver decides he's going to run the flat tire another 400 miles under the auspices that he's going to get the tire repaired. So they felt that that would be better served being under the title of unsafe driving. So they're going to move those in there. And then what the end result of that is going to be, as it comes up, you're going to see now those three, controlled substance and alcohol, are going to be moved into unsafe driving, and that'll all fall under that particular grouping. All right, so let's move on to reorganized roadside violations. So there's currently 959 roadside violations within the SMS system. You could say there's 973 if you'd like to incorporate 14 additional violations that are really basically out of service orders operating while out of service violations, which are not in the SMS system at this point in time. So let's go with this 959. They're going to break those 959 down into 160 violation groups of similar safety behaviors to prevent inconsistencies that occur when multiple violations are cited for a single or very similar underlying issue. This is a good example here. I pulled this right off of their foundational document. Now, if you see up here in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see the prioritization preview pages 7 through 9. I just wanted to help everyone out a little bit instead of going through that whole document. If you go to pages 7 through 9, this is where that would be explained. For example, an officer would write maybe one carrier up under 393.48, which is worth 4 points under CSA currently for inoperative or defective brakes. Next, officer 2 pulls over carrier number 2, and he decides he wants to be a little more specific, and he's going to cite that carrier for these 2 brake violations. Now, you could go with either one of these, but for carrier number 2 now, they've gained 8 points under their CSA score for those particular violations, whereas carrier number 1 is only assigned 4 points for that particular violation. And keep in mind on the if there's any out of service violations, then obviously that's going to add another 2 points to that point structure itself. Let's see. So what they're talking about doing is going from a scale of 1 to 10 for severity weights and breaking that into 1 or 2. And we're going to see that as we move on into the next slide. So in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see simplified severity weights. Let's take a look what that's going to entail. So they're going to simplifying violation severity weights to adopt a more straightforward approach. Again, the upper left-hand corner, that'll give you pages 9 through 11 is where you're going to find this information in the foundational document. And let's see what their proposed methodology is going to look like. So they want to replace the 1 to 10 severity weighting scale with a value scale of just 1 or 2. So in essence, each violation group is assigned a 1. Now they're going to move from the basics, and again, they've changed these into safety categories and then the groups. So each group in and of itself, which is now going to be, for example, unsafe driving and controlled substance, is together. Hours of service is together, remains the same. Vehicle maintenance driver observed is going to be organized into two categories. And then we remain the same with hazmat compliance, driver fitness, and crash indicator. So any violations written on a violation from an officer in these particular groups is automatically going to be assigned a 1. The only time that it's going to be assigned a 2 is if there's an out of service, except for the unsafe driving category, or a driver disqualifying violation. And those would fall under 383.51 tables 1 through 4. So for example, some of those, a conviction or refusal to test, under the influence of alcohol, controlled substance, using a vehicle to commit a felony, driving while suspended or revoked. Again, table 2, anything over 15 miles and over on the limit, reckless driving, for example, following too closely, cell phone use or texting on a second conviction within 3 years. So those would fall under the driver disqualifying violations. If one of those 2 items are on that inspection report, that grouping, wherever that may fall, is going to be given a 2. So they're trying to make it a little easier, although there are some inherent issues with that, and you'll see some of those brought up in those comments if you read them from some of the larger carriers and the different large groups. So let's look down, second row down all the way to the left, improved intervention thresholds. Let's take a look at what they're proposing on that. Again, that information is on pages 17 and 18 of the foundational document. So what they're going to be doing is adjusting the intervention thresholds for 3 of the safety categories and 2 of the safety groups. Again, to focus on carriers with the highest crash rates. So let's see what groups they're talking about and what categories they're talking about. So for example, the violation group, driver fitness. Previously, the threshold numbers were 80% for a general carrier. What they're proposing is to move that up to 90%. For the passenger and driver fitness, it previously was 65%, they're moving to 75. In hazmat, it was 75, they're going to move that to 85. In the violation group hazmat compliance, they're going to move that 80%, and they're going to go ahead and move that up to 90%. And the reason they're doing this is they felt that these items here did not have a big correlation to crash risk. So that they decided to move these thresholds up before there would be any interventions placed on these particular carriers. And by doing this, it eliminated a number of carriers, and they were able to focus more on carriers that had a higher risk, or they could use their resources. And as you remember from the first slide or second slide, where they only have so many inspectors, 400 federal and roughly 1,200 state. So this allowed them to more effectively go in and provide interventions for carriers. Again, down the middle there, you'll get proportional percentiles. This was brought up a number of times in their webinars. And we've even seen this issue at AIM where our percentiles jump considerably, both ways. They decrease and increase substantially for apparently no real reason. So what they're going to try to do is smooth out that process so those jumps aren't as big. So one of the ways they're going to do this is they're going to try to customize the reports to the carrier's exact number of inspections. So if you are familiar, you fall into safety event groups, and each basic has its own safety event group. So if you fought, for example, here, let's move on to this. Well, I'll go through these 2 items here before I get ahead of myself. They're hoping to stabilize the results, and I mentioned it before, by allowing a gradual percentile change from month to month instead of such large increases where you don't know why it occurred. And then also they're going to try to incorporate no substantial percentile increase without a corresponding measure increase. In other words, if nothing happened, if there were no inspections, then there shouldn't be any reason for the numbers to go up or down. So they're going to try to smooth that out for everybody. And in regards to the safety event group, so for example, again, pages 11 through 15 of that document, you'll find this information. I pulled the unsafe driving basic for this particular example. As you can see, the combination segment, which is going to be the tractor trailers, you have 5 safety event groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. To the right are the number of inspections with the violations before you move into the next grouping. So depending on where you are within that particular number of inspections, you may in combination 1 be at number 8. You may have just had your 8th inspection, which may have brought your percentile down because you're in that group where a number of people have had 8 inspections and it's spread out over the whole total of inspections. But now all of a sudden you have number 9 and you come in at the bottom of combination 2. And now your percentile could change dramatically, as you are now at the bottom of that particular safety event group, or SEG as they call them. So what they're trying to do is change that to where it's just each individual inspection. So I'm not sure what the finished product is going to look like. It'll be interesting to see if this is going to even be in the system, if they're speaking about doing it by inspections. But currently, that's the way it's broken out. If you move over to the right, you'll see the straight truck segment. It's a little bit different. The safety event group for straight 1 is 3 to 4 inspections, 2, 5 to 8. So you can see it accordingly there. All right, and what they're going to also try to do now is to put a greater focus on recent violations. So only calculating percentiles for safety categories in which a carrier has received a violation within the last 12 months. And that's to focus on carriers with more recent safety issues. Again, they went into this methodology and found that really, if you've went more than a year without a violation, that the chances of you having issues that need to be looked at were less than someone else. So again, they're trying to take away a lot of the carriers that have not had inspections within the last 12 months and focus on the carriers with more recent safety inspections. So previously in the safety measurement system, they could have been prioritized. Now they won't be. Now hours of service compliance, vehicle maintenance, the maintenance driver observed, hazmat, driver fitness, they would only calculate a percentile if there was at least 1 inspection within the last 12 months and not be prioritized at all in that category based on roadside inspections. So again, this is going to be the proposed methodology, and a percentile would be calculated if there's at least 1 roadside inspection within the last 12 months. But if there are no inspections within the last 12, there's going to be no percentile assigned and no prioritization, because they're going to be focusing all their efforts and resources on other carriers that have more severe problems. So the updated utilization factor, this is kind of buried there in the SMF methodology booklet, I guess, for lack of a better word. But the current limit right now, and this was put together back in 2009, is currently at 200,000 miles. And what they found was that this didn't really accurately account for the on-road exposure, especially for the high utilization carriers, such as the big names, the cross-country guys, US Express, Swift, Werner, JB, any of the large carriers that run, maybe run teams. It didn't really reflect the increased exposure on the roadway that those carriers would see. The vehicle miles traveled have increased dramatically since 2009, when it was first developed, and FMCSA reviewed it in 2014 and 2020. And they went into the MCMIS system, Motor Carrier Management Information System, and they found that the increase was actually justified. So what they're going to do is increase this to about 250,000 miles for the vehicle miles traveled for each average power unit. And that's going to account more accurately for exposure to crashes on road enforcement. Now, what this did was it actually opened up in visibility for 314 other carriers that they had not seen previously because of the low utilization on the vehicle miles traveled. So for everyone on your MCS 150 form that needs to be renewed every biannually. On line 21, you want to really update your line 21, which is the carrier mileage, and make sure that is it accurately reflects the mileage that you're putting on your particular vehicles. And also line 27, which is the number of vehicles operated. So make sure you get that done. Make sure you update that to your most current numbers so that you can work within that system and not fall into one of these 314 carriers that they found out later after the fact. In fact, out of those 314, they found violations in 255 in the unsafe driving category, 157 in crash indicator, and 98 of those received percentiles in both categories. So what this did is it really revealed a 2 to 3 times larger on-road exposure than the national average to those particular carriers that would not have normally been brought into the system under the old vehicle miles traveled 200,000 mile limit. New segmentation. So let's take a look and see where that'll lead us. So they're talking about extending the segmentation of carriers by operation of vehicle type. And they're going to add additional safety categories to improve the carrier-to-carrier comparisons within the hazmat industry. One of those comments, I'm not mistaken, I can't remember off the top of my head, we'll see it when it comes up, but has to do with a hazmat carrier and how they were inspected in terms of cargo versus non-cargo type of carriers. So currently under the safety measurement system, cargo tanks and non-cargo tank carriers are compared similarly when they're calculating their percentiles. So, for example, they'll now begin to differentiate between the two, and the criteria will be that the cargo tanks, if 50% or more of the total placarded hazmat inspections or cargo tank inspections, or the other criteria is going to be if there's less than 50% of the total placarded hazmat inspections or cargo tank inspections. So that's kind of how they're going to break those up. They're also going to look into the driver fitness category and break that into straight and again combination or tractor trailer and segment that out and hopefully get a little bit more clarity as they're moving forward into their system. And the last one is going to be for that accounting for not preventable crashes. When I was on the webinars that they offered, a number of people asked about the Crash Preventability Determination Program, or CPDP, and where that was going to stand or where that was going to go into the methodology. That will remain. Nothing is going to change in that particular program. There were a number of comments about how that program didn't seem to work so well in terms of getting your data queue review done. But that was a separate item from this whole system. But the biggest thing is that will remain, that will be in the system, and you can use that if, for example, your driver is found not at fault for accidents. You can go into the data queue system, the review, get that removed from the system and change to better reflect your particular carrier's ratings and percentiles. So let's see where we stand here. Here's okay, this is the next page. I'm hoping these links should open, so let's give it a shot and see. Now, when you go on the CSA prioritization preview, this page will open up and you'll have your preview resources in there. And if you click on these, really, this is a tremendous amount of information on these pages. I mean, I really was impressed with how well they did. So let's see if we can get it opened up quick enough here. Hopefully, well, it looks like it's coming up. There we go. All right, so this basically took, so this is actually at the very end. Again, we went into the proposed changes of the reorganizing the basics. So this will give you the nuts and bolts of what's going to occur. I kind of gave you that 30,000 view outlook, but this is really where you want to go to find out all the details in terms of what's going to be going on in the future. The reorganized roadside violations, you can see there are 959. They're going to change that into 16 violation groups. Down here, the following violations would receive a severity weight of 2. So as I mentioned earlier, the out of service violations and driver disqualifying, which that's going to be the 380, 351. Page 3, this will give you some more of the improved intervention threshold. So this is where I got that. So this is where they're going to move these down and around. Proportional percentiles instead of safety event groups. So they'll be removing those safety event groups because there will be no grouping. It's going to be on individual inspections. If you had 7 inspections, that's what you're going to be rated on. You're not going to be rated on a group of, I forgot what that one was, 3 to 8. So if you have 7, you're only going to have 7. You're not going to be in the group where some people only had 5 and you're looked upon poorly. And then greater focus on recent violations. And again, the updated utilization factor. So it's kind of nice that they give you the current, and then they give you the new prioritization, and then they give you why is this important. So they really give you the, who, what, and where of why they're doing this, and to try to give you a little bit more information. And then the last plate is that new segmentation that I just went through. Let me get out of that. Let's take a look at the proposed changes guide. And again, everyone, if when you go into that prioritization preview, just look under preview resources, click on those, and these same items will open up for you. You can print them out, PDF them, or put them in your file. So let's see, moving up here. So again, the cover sheet, these are going to be the proposed changes. And it's going to tell you how the methodology is changing. Why is it important? And I mentioned that a number of times throughout this. Again, it's kind of repetitive stuff, but in each one gives you a little bit more detail than the previous one. Why is it important? How is it changing? Tells you what categories that it's changing to. Okay, so good stuff there. If you'd like to click on any of those links, I'm pretty sure that Jess will probably include this as a something that could be sent out, so you can have this. I'm not sure if someone else would be able to pull off these links, but possibly. Again, if you go into that CSA website, you'll be able to do it. Let's see. I need a faster computer, it looks like. All right, this is the big one. This is similar to the SMS methodology. It is what the updated version, I think, is October of 2023. That's the huge one. So that's kind of what this one is. It's going to be version 1.5. This put out on March 2022. So there's quite a few pages. I'm not going to obviously go through the whole thing. Just kind of grab some. But here's where you can go into the groupings and see. For example, this is the unsafe driving violation group now. And these are going to be the violations under this particular group. And then it'll also tell you whether CDL disqualifying, it'll tell you that. And it'll give you a description. And I mentioned earlier that there were some issues. As you can see here, the speeding violations currently under SMS, you have a 6 to 10 is worth 4 points, a 10 to 14 is worth 7, and a 15 and over is 10. Now, if you get a ticket for 14 miles an hour over, and that's all you got the ticket for, under that violation grouping of unsafe driving, you're only going to be a 1. It's only going to be a 1. So you will be compared to the same guy that does 6 miles over as you would if you did 14. And if you go in those comments, there were a few comments made about that and how that's going to be reflected. That doesn't seem fair. That seemed the severity of going 14 over is considerably higher than doing 6 miles an hour over. So again, some of those, but this is really informative. This gives you all you would need to know in terms of the grouping and where it's all going to fit. We're now into the hours of service compliance violation group. So just wanted to throw that out there so everybody's familiar with it. And the last one is going to be more of a Excel spreadsheet type of thing, and I'll give you an idea what that looks like. Hopefully this will open relatively quickly. And we're getting about ready to close up, everyone, so if you can bear with me a few more minutes. And like I said, this is the 30,000 foot view. There's so much information. I really don't have enough time in the course of a day probably to get it all covered, but I think we can give you a good start. All right, so this came up pretty good here. Let's see. So we got consuming alcohol. Move this over a little bit. Let's see. Well, let's take we'll just leave it here. These violation groups are broken in this way. Again, you got the violation group itself, consuming alcohol. Those are the violations, individual violations with the federal violation number codes on them. For example, 392.2, failure to maintain lane, driver disqualifying no, and when they've added that. So they'll be continually adding addendums and additions to this program as time goes on, which not the least of which they added that 114 out of service order violations into this particular program recently. So that's why that number, some say 759 in the violations, others say 793. So that's kind of the difference there. All right, and then the last page, let me get back out of here and over to my favorite page. All right, so I wrote a list of the comments of interest. So for example, again, I put the page numbers on here so you can go right to the page. I forgot, there might have been 9 pages, I think, total. But these are the comments that I found of interest. Others may not. Others may find them very interesting. But the Owner Operator Independent Driver Association, page 2, National Transportation Safety Board, Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. DriveWise actually had a very interesting comment section in there. I found quite interesting. Minnesota State Highway Patrol, Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. There are our friends from CVSA. They actually, again, on page 7, they had a really nice input in terms of what their thoughts are on this whole program. In addition to the Truckload Carriers Association, and last but not least, the National Tank Truck Carriers. And that's where the hazmat segmentation came into play on the tank truck carriers. They had some input as to how they feel things should be done and properly reflected. So again, just trying to take you to it so you don't have to suffer through all 177. But I found them interesting, and I think you would also. And then the last page, and these are just the cover sheets. So the current safety measurement system on the left there, the SMS methodology, don't know how many pages it is, but it's a lot of pages to read through. This version is currently at 3.14. There is now a new version, 3.16, that was issued in October of 2023, so just a month ago. And usually those are just updates and addendums and things. It's not a complete new booklet. But if you're not familiar with that, I would highly recommend you become familiar with that. And again, to the right of that is what we're looking at now, this new program that's going to be coming into play. And this is what's called the foundational document. And if you want to watch the 3 webinars that the feds offer, they will mention the word foundational document. I didn't count how many times, but it was mentioned numerous times. So this is basically their Bible for their new methodology coming out. And really one of the ways you get ahead of the curve on it and get a good understanding of what's coming down the road, as they say. So I think I'm going to wrap it up. I hope everyone found this informative and added a little bit of information to your library there. Again, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoy doing these things. Again, don't don't be afraid to reach out and say hello or ask any questions or comments, and I'd be more than happy to try to get back to you. So I'll turn it back over to Jessica and see where we go.
That was fantastic, John. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for John? If you do, you can unmute yourself and ask them verbally. You can raise your hand or you can type them into the chat. We'll just give you a couple minutes here. That was really thorough, so I would not be surprised if there aren't any questions.
Yeah, a lot of information there. It's this was a fun-filled webinar. I was trying to figure out how to get all this in within an hour. So
You did a really great job. And I know we had discussed with the changing marijuana laws in Ohio, where we're headquartered and a lot of our customer bases, there's a lot of kind of moving earth beneath people's feet right now. So we are going to have a, a webinar dedicated solely to that content in January. I really encourage everyone to join it. John's incredible at his research and his homework. And, I think that'll be a helpful session as well that kind of expands on today's content. We haven't got any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Like I said, there will be an email that will come out to everyone that registered with a link to the recording and John's slides in it. You'll have those links to go to those extra documents that John was expanding upon there towards the end. So, Paul, you have your hand up. Go ahead, sir. Paul Stitham, did you have a question? All right, he must have bumped that. So, all right, John, thank you so much. You are an absolute treasure and an expert in this content. So we thank you for your time today. Thank you to everyone who joined us. We really appreciate you being on. If there's anything that we can do for you, anything you want to talk about as far as distribution or transportation is concerned, let us at AIM know. We're happy to help. Hope everyone has a fantastic Thanksgiving. Everybody eats their turkey to their heart's content. So have a great week, everybody. Talk to you soon.
thank you, Jessica.
Thanks all. Great job, John.
Thank you. Bye-bye.